All right, it's excuse me, it's Tuesday, May 17th, 6:30 p.m. and I call the Council Finance and Administration Committee to order. Councilmember Mayhew and Councilmember Christensen are present. Councilmember Holloway was not able to attend tonight. If there's no objection, we'll excuse his absence.
None.
Hearing no objection, he's so excused. Don't believe there are any changes to the agenda other than that the approval of minutes will not be on the agenda for tonight. That'll come back to us at our next meeting. Any other items for the agenda?
Just a point of clarification. Should the comprehensive financial policy update be under agenda bills or under discussion?
I can speak to that, Councilmember Christensen. It is on our agenda bill log. It has an agenda bill assigned to it. At this point, it's just a memo that's come out. So it still really falls under agenda bills because it will come back to you in that format at some point.
Okay, sounds good. Then does the fire department staff request need to be switched as well? I was just trying to figure out what the differentiation was between the two.
We don't have an agenda bill for the fire department staff request, and I don't know if there will be one.
Okay.
I believe the fire chief is present and might be able to speak to that.
All right. If there's no agenda bill, then we're fine with it on the agenda. Are you any other concerns regarding the agenda, Councilmember Christensen?
None. Thank you.
All right, then if there's no if there's no objection, we'll take the agenda as approved. See no objection, it is so approved. All right, moving on to the public comments. Let's just take a look here. I don't see any members of the public present in the council chamber, nor do I see any members of the public present via Zoom. So seeing no members of the public for public comment, we will move on to approval of warrants and claims. Councilmember Christensen, do you have any questions or comments regarding the claims report?
No questions at this time. I appreciated that a lot more of the information seemed to be included in the entries. I found that to be very helpful, especially as I was trying to go through and figure out what the different disbursements were. So I think that's the only comment that I have. Just thank you.
Yeah, I had the same observation and share your gratitude to staff. Thank you. I also don't have any questions. So if there are no objections, we'll take the claims report as approved for forwarding to the full council. See no objection, it is so approved. Agenda Bill 22-082 related to collective bargaining agreement. I think it was in our advanced materials, has to do with a difference in the clause that, or the clauses that were approved by the city as opposed to the union, and a proposal to have the city ratify the version that was ratified by the union and had some additional clauses. Any questions or comments, Councilmember Christensen, or do you have any questions on this matter for staff?
Not particularly. It seems like there's just really the addition of some minor language requiring the city to go ahead and meet some dates to start work on a couple studies, basically. So I don't have anything further. It looks like Chief Pereira may have some comments though.
Yeah, I just want to get through the council part first. I think sometimes staff feel they need to make a big presentation, but I expect we've probably read the materials, so don't want to waste their time. The only question I had, Chief, is what the impact would be, if any, if we do not ratify this proposal. In other words, we just leave what we've ratified. If we just leave the status quo, is there any problem that would result from that?
So the reason why they added that language, even though it was in a footnote, was because they were concerned about the contract actually passing the group.
Yeah, no, I understand the reason for their request. My question is simply, if we don't do this, is there any impact?
Yep, yeah, that's where I was going with that answer.
Okay. Go ahead,
So,
sorry.
No, not a problem. So that's why they added that language to it. If we were to return it to them, then they would have to go back and ratify that original version. And then it would really be up to the group whether or not it passed or not at that time. So that could certainly be an option. You return it to them, you'd vote no on this, return it to them. And the reason why I had my hand up is there's also one potential additional change. I wasn't going to give a large or long presentation. It was more to just highlight one possible change that I just got off the phone with the mayor because it was a late catch. So
no, go ahead, Chief. I didn't mean to cut you off. I just was trying to relieve you of the burden of walking us through something that I think we both did our homework on. No, please tell us anything additional.
No, that's wonderful. So did that last answer your question about the first part?
It did, but let me be sure I understood that. So what you're saying is we're actually in a situation where we don't have a ratified contract, because
Correct.
in order to have that be true, both sides would have had to ratify the identical thing.
Correct, exactly. We're just making sure the I's are dotted and the T's are crossed. And they ratified a different version. We're carrying it now forward to do our due diligence. There's no financial impact to this. It was something that was approved, although not in the agreement. It was approved by council in the summary of changes. So we just wanted to make sure that the council understands that this is now added to the agreement so that they are identical.
Right. So I guess my perception right now is that the union has acted in bad faith, that we had reached an agreement which the city ratified, and then they deviated from that agreement and are attempting to negotiate by adding things that after ratification. It seems like a pretty surprising move and something that should be bothersome to us, but am I not understanding this correctly? Is that not the case?
Yeah, no, I think I don't know if I'd classify it as negotiating in bad faith. I think they recognize that the city had approved the contract, as well as in the summary of changes, we had acknowledged at the table that we had agreed that we were going to do the compensation study. We were going to renegotiate the term. That was in the summary. They wanted it in the agreement itself. So both parties had agreed to that. It's just where it was in the contract. And frankly, they did reach out before they did it. And we said, yeah, no, that's okay. Go ahead and add it. We'll just have to bring it back to council to re-ratify. Just again, we saw this as more of a procedural thing for council to understand that the agreements were slightly different and we want to make sure that they're identical.
Okay, so there was plenty of communication on this. This was, everyone understood that they were in agreement on this. We're just sort of catching up some procedural things is your perspective on this?
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, got it. Thank you. That helps a lot. And you wanted to bring something else to our attention.
I did, yeah. There was one other part of the agreement when we brought it forward to council to ratify. We adjusted in the Teamsters negotiations team had agreed to this, was to adjust the seasonal pay scale from $14 an hour at higher and then $1 more hour per hour to 3 or 3 to increase it so that it actually complies with the state minimum wage and bump it up to $15 an hour. So they had agreed to that, but when they ratified their version, it wasn't in there. And the city's been struggling to try to fill those positions. We actually did some research and found that the median, the average is right around $18 an hour, with the median in the region is about $19 an hour. So we're pretty far behind. So we've been having a conversation with the Teamsters about making that adjustment. We're still having those conversations. I just wanted to give the council a heads up that you may see that potentially come forward with that adjustment in there, either 15 like you already agreed to, or as high as 19, more in line with what the region is paying for the teams, for the seasonal workers.
Gotcha. Okay. And is that how many? Actually, I'm just doing some math in my head. Okay. Actually, I don't have a question. Okay. Great. I don't have any. So what you're asking us to approve tonight is sending this forward to the full council for ratification of this revised contract, I don't know if that's quite the right language to use, but this as now written, you're asking us, the full council, to ratify that. However, you're saying there may be a further change of the nature you just described to us before it comes to council.
There might be. Again, we're under the gun a little bit because it's already May and we're trying to hire seasonals. We're struggling with getting them. So we're feeling the squeeze of that. So if we were to make the change, then we would add that to it. I would explain that at the time. I'd revise the agenda bill as well. And, you know, procedurally, there's a couple of options. The committee could consider putting this on the consent agenda for the procedural side of it. And then if we do have to change the wage, then we could put it under the committee side of it. So there's a couple of different ways to go about it, but yes, it's possible that we may have to do one more revision.
Got it. Okay, Councilmember Christensen.
So just for clarification, the change that you're talking about is in section A6.
Correct.
And so instead of the at higher year 1, year 2, year 3, would it all be 19, or would it go up starting at 19 and go up from there?
That's what we're discussing right now. Our recommendation would be starting at the least starting at higher 19.
Okay.
And then we could do it all across the board, or we could actually have them increase succession by $1 per hour. And I can provide more detail on that to the committee if you'd like, regarding what we had found when I did that survey of the region.
I think I'm comfortable without the additional presentation on that. I was just trying to make sure that I was following exactly what the change was.
But yeah, no, that is basics.
I'm also comfortable without any additional information. I kind of did it in my head there. Yeah, no, I think this sounds great, Chief.
Okay.
Let me ask, so, Councilmember Christensen, my own thought is, setting aside this other change for a moment, this that's in front of us, I would have thought is a consent agenda item.
Mhm.
Did you have a similar thought or a different thought?
Yeah, I'm agreeable to that.
And so then, I guess the issue, just for good housekeeping, would be is, well, I guess I'd say if you were going to adjust that item to 19, I'd also be comfortable with it still being on consent agenda, because I think the two of us are agreeable to that and would agree to sending that with that change forward also on consent. Councilmember Christensen, do you also have that view?
Yeah, I'm fine with that.
So then the only thing is, Chief, if you end up with something that's different than either of those outcomes, then just, I think for good housekeeping, I'd request that it not be on consent agenda. Ask the clerk to put that on the regular agenda, just so you can tell us what changed.
Nope, sounds wonderful. Perfect.
Now, Councilmember Christensen, do you agree with that, though?
I'm comfortable with that, yes.
All right, City Clerk Estrada, are you clear on what we're asking you to do?
This agenda bill will go on, excuse me, am I echoing? This agenda bill will go not on consent, but under agenda bills on the next agenda.
I may not have heard you correctly. So what we're asking is, this agenda bill would go on consent as long as it's either as we see it here, or if it's been modified to change that seasonal rate to $19 an hour. But if there's any change beyond that, then in that case, it still would go forward to full council, but not on the consent agenda. Is that making sense?
Thank you for the clarification. That's helpful.
Great. Okay. Super. Chief, that's great. Thank you. All right. Moving on to comprehensive financial policy update. So, Councilmember Christensen, I got through the whole thing. I don't know if you did.
Yeah?
Yeah.
I did. I took notes on the first 5, what was it, 4 or 5 sections. And yeah, I've read through the rest a few times, but it does seem as though it'll take a few reads to stick.
I think you're exactly right. I have the advantage of knowing these policies for a few years. To be honest, I have a few comments, but other than that, I think it's great to get. I think it's good to go. So, you know, I have a few comments to make. Let's see what you think of those. Love to hear yours, but I think it's a document in pretty good shape. So maybe we just sort of walk through it and see how we go.
Sounds good.
All right. Sorry, let me get to the first page here. I got things out of order. Let's see. So my first comment is on this first section that has to do with human services. I guess it's section 17. And I'm a little confused because in mine, it seems to be here twice. Maybe it was an earlier version. Never figured that out. Oh yeah, maybe it's two versions. Anyway, there's a section 17 on human services.
Sorry, can you provide the page of the
Ooh,
document,
good.
just because there were, especially at the outset for human services, a few different versions of it?
Oh, I might have a different version. I got you. So my page number, well, let's see. It says page 1, but I think so. In my version, there's a table of contents which goes for about 5 pages. Then there's a resolution. And in that resolution is a section 17 human services.
Excuse me, Chair. If you have a moment, can we potentially recognize Jen Ferguson, who may have a couple initial comments?
Sorry, can we just finish what we're doing there? I'm just trying to orient ourselves on this, and then I can have a look at that. Did we find the page that I was trying to find?
I see the page. It looks like it's page 8 of the 106 page attachment. Is that the one that you're referring to?
Yeah, let's just go there and see if that's it. Not 8, 8. Huh. So go ahead and scroll from there. Oh yeah, there we are. Okay, so that's where I was. So so first off, are you coordinated with that location, Councilmember Christensen? You know where I'm looking? What's on the screen there? Yeah.
On the large screen is the one
Yes.
that 1402 is what you're referring to? Okay.
Yeah, that's where I was trying to get to, which I think is the beginning of this. Is that, so you're kind of tuned into where I was trying to go to?
Mhm.
Okay, great. Finance Director, I see you have your hand up.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. What I wanted to do is to just quickly go through and orient the committee to the memo and the exhibits that were provided at the last committee meeting. What you're seeing here in those exhibits, you see Exhibit A in the memo. This is current policy and code. And so that was also part of the confusion for the agenda bill. And we do have an agenda bill coming to connect the comprehensive financial policy update. This information that was provided is current policy. I do want to walk back very briefly in the memo, page 2 of the memo. At the top of page 2, financial policy evaluation steps. One of the first steps was to review existing financial policies, and that was Exhibit A. And that's the information that was provided in the memo. The third bullet point then on page 2 of the original memo was to conduct a risk assessment. And that was provided to the committee members under separate cover for committee members to complete if they wished, to help understand or to have a dialogue on risk assessment. And that is for the reserve and fund balance section. And then the final bullet was the proposed updated financial policy that is in the final stages of being prepared and will be sent to the committee for the next steps in the discussion on financial policy. Also then to further orient to the memo at the bottom of page 2 was a financial policy example of new proposed policy, and those are proposed sections of new policy. So the exhibit A is current policies. There are a number of separate policies as well as separate municipal code sections that identify financial related policy and procedures. And that's the information that you have had for study.
So I have no idea where that led us. I thought we were to be prepared to go through these sections and comment on them tonight, which is what I thought the committee members committed to do, and certainly is what I spent my time doing in preparation for this meeting. Are you asking us not to do that?
Mayor Pro Tem, in an email that I sent, we can certainly go through and review current policy, and I'm happy to answer any questions about current policy. I did send out, we had discussed at the last committee, a risk assessment worksheet, and that is something, as I indicated, if council members choose to complete that, that is something that we can go through tonight. So I'm happy to talk about current policy in the sections that we have, as well as the risk assessment worksheet.
So I was just going to go through the policies and give comments. Are you not wanting us to do that?
If you would like to go through current financial policies, happy to go through those policies and answer any questions that you have, or to take feedback on current policy. The proposed new policy is another document that we would be also discussing at these sessions for that updates to policy.
Councilmember Christensen.
I guess 2 questions. So when the new proposed financial policies are going to be circulated, is it going to be like a red line change so that we can compare it with current policy? I'm just trying to figure out, I guess, whether it makes sense to go through what's existing if staff has already gone through and made a proposed.
Well, the current policies are separate policies.
Mhm.
So it is not apples to apples comparison. When proposed policy is finished, and in my email, I had indicated we had some staffing challenges and a focus on getting our financial statements out. So we will do a crosswalk from current policy to proposed policy. But in the current policies, just for example, there are 2 human services policy versions that were adopted, and we provided those for council to study to show that there are 2 versions. There are also multiple policies. There's a comprehensive policy that was adopted. There's an update to the comprehensive policy. There's separate investment policy. And then the excerpts of actual Snoqualmie municipal code were provided, and those are in separate sections of the code. So again, the proposed comprehensive policies will not look exactly the same because our goal is to shift away from multiple separate policies and code into one comprehensive document that serves as a manual for the council, staff, and the public.
So, Finance Director, I am completely lost. I went through a process 2 weeks ago of committing with this committee to going through these policies, and I came prepared tonight to do that. Are you saying that you don't want us? I simply don't understand what you want us to do. You want us to go through that tonight, or you would like us to wait until we have a proposal from you and then react to that proposal. And which is it that you want us to do?
I would prefer if we could wait. However, as I had indicated under separate cover in our communications, I am happy to answer any questions or take feedback on current policies. I'm also happy to answer any questions about the risk assessment worksheet that was provided. And that is pertains to the section in financial policy regarding reserves.
Okay, so you keep bringing that up. Councilor Christensen, did you have your hand up?
No, I put it down. Thank you.
All right. I really don't understand your answer. I don't want to spend time going through this if that's not what you want us to do.
I would ask that the next Finance and Administration Committee proposed policy will be ready, and we will be able to have a discussion on proposed policy compared to current policies. Again, they do not align section for section because of the nature of the old policies being adopted over time and in various formats.
All right, then I would just point out to you, you're missing a bunch of the existing policies. And so I think if we're going to have a full conversation, we need to get all the rest of the policies that the council has been following also added in. For example, the council has a long-standing, decades-long policy about the use of construction sales tax. That has a decades-long policy on, well, at least a decade long policy on how utility taxes to be used and certain other revenue sources and how they're dedicated. So there's a whole set of, and I think you made a good point earlier, you know, these policies over time come from a whole bunch of sources. And so I really feel for you trying to corral these things up. But there are a bunch of other policies that the council's been operating under for a long time, the city's been operating under, that we probably ought to get captured into this process. So
Agreed.
I gave you a couple examples. I don't know how we can kind of, I think it's kind of incumbent on us to try and help you capture these. Is there a way that we can do that? Like, would you like us to kind of think through everything we can think of and just sort of send it over to you, or what would be the way we could help the best?
I appreciate that. What would be helpful is if you recall if it was a resolution or if the policy was set, you see in some of the current examples that you have, what we found, that it was a resolution, financial policy was adopted in multiple sections in that larger comprehensive policies, or if it's code. I've gone through the code, the finance and revenue code, and found all of the financial policy related. And so if you can identify if it was a resolution or ordinance, or if you believe it was in code, that will at least give us some place to start.
Give you a fighting chance, right?
Yeah. Well, we're already in the hole digging up from, to start this project. So any direction to where and when, what year would be helpful, and we'll do our best to do extra searching. We want it all the current. Thank you.
Yeah, just so you know, I'll send you whatever I know of. Most of these, like the policies I just mentioned, predate me being on the council, and so
Okay.
I got to try and rack my brain and figure out how I even discovered these were policies. But they were sort of talked about every year, well, every budget cycle. So you know how those can be. You've been around, sort of. Where was that originally written? Gosh, that you got a challenge.
Bring up a good Mayor Pro Tem, you bring up a good point too, is when the council adopts a budget and adopts a policy statement in that budget, if it's not if it's not put into a formal policy form and it's in that budget, sometimes then it gets forgotten.
Yep.
And it doesn't survive the 2-year period of that budget, because the budget ordinance is a set time frame. So that's a potential for why these policies have not been formally incorporated into policies under a resolution or ordinance. And so what you'll find in the proposed policy that's coming, you'll see some of those sections. If we're not able to find the actual place and format where it was adopted, you'll see some of these issues for the use of sales tax and utility taxes in a proposed section. And you'll hear me talk about, if it's not in current policy, there's nothing to crosswalk it to, but we still recommend that council adopt policy on these topics. And so that'll be an opportunity to essentially memorialize past efforts to set budgets, and that's really the goal, is to get it in that comprehensive financial policy document.
Sounds like a great goal. So yeah, I'll lob over anything I can think of. I'll try and rack my brain and come up. There was, just so you know, that about there must be 3 finance directors ago, the one that was there when I first arrived at council, used to prepare this massive 300-page document, and there were some of these policies were sort of noted on, page 243 at the bottom, like these, we're saying. So, that's the sort of, and then maybe that related back to some other time. Anyway, yeah, you've got to, trying to corral these is going to be a challenge. So I'll send you what I know.
Thank you.
Certainly, yeah. There's a not named person with their hand up called Council Chamber.
Hi, yes, that would be me, Drew, the senior financial analyst.
Mr. Boutte, how are
Thank
you?
you. Yes, it's a fun environment here at Council Chambers, as you can see. I just wanted to add to the discussion a little bit. Some of the things that you're talking about, there's no better way to put this, that they exist by oral tradition, that there is kind of no written record of some of the things that you've discussed. So when we talk about the non-recurring sales tax, for example, if it's not in that comprehensive financial policy document, it's because it's a story that's been told over the city over the long term, for example. This is an opportunity for us to clean up some of that and actually get that into a policy document.
Oh, no, I think you're right on, but it also gives us a chance to kind of say, okay, here's what that thing that's been passed down, we think it's this, is this really what we want? So it's a chance to relook at it as well, right?
Right, yes. You probably heard conversations around $300,000 a REIT going to parks, for example. Just another example of some of the things that we've been discussing here over time, but that there's been no formal sort of written policy adopted for us to accomplish that as part of the budget process. So, yes.
All right, good. Okay, so then in that case, I can just, I'll just get, I had so few comments, Councilmember Christensen, if you're willing, I'd like to just give them, at least then finance director can kind of capture that and, think about that, I guess, before we get to the full conversation. Is that okay use of our time, or do you want to move on?
That's fine with me.
All right. So there are relatively few comments, Ms. Ferguson. So that whole section on human services, for what it's worth, I don't think we need the whole section. It talks about reserves that we don't do this anywhere else. It doesn't honestly make a ton of sense to me. I'm not even sure we do it. And if we are, I'm not sure I know why. So just for what it's worth, my thought, there was literally nothing in that section that I thought we needed as a council policy. So give you that input. in the, moving right beyond that into the investment policy, looks fine, but it does say something. I see this in policies around in my professional life as well, and I always just wince. I mean, obviously, I think you'll pick up, there's some things like city treasurer that we don't have, so there's sort of some title fixes that are needed, but it does say safety. It says, there's a section on the second page of it, it says safety. Safety of principle is the foremost objective of the city, which of course can't possibly be true, because if it was, we would never invest, right? Because any investment of any type is more risky than not investing. It may be a very small risk, but so this, like, and it's just a throwaway statement, because if you take that sentence out, the rest of it actually expresses what we're trying to express just fine. So that just for what it's worth. And then there's also a section in there that talks about intent of a treasurer, and it just doesn't seem like statements like that are helpful to a policy. I mean, if it was the intent of the city, but anyway, I don't even think you need to get into intent, just get to, here's our policy, unless we're trying to explain the policy. So that, and then towards the end of that section, there's a whole section that starts with internal controls and performance standards. Everything from internal controls on to glossary just looked redundant to existing policies we have in the city. Just seemed like you didn't need that there. So, Councilmember Christensen, did you have any comments in either of those sections that you wanted to add?
Not necessarily. I think I might wait to see what the new proposed looks like. Because it may just rule out the few questions that I had.
Okay, super. The only other thing I'll give you then, Ms. Ferguson, is when we move now into the actual financial management policies, the very first section currently is something that says financial philosophy. The whole section just didn't seem to be needed, but and then obviously you'll pick this up. There's all kinds, I mean, this is very outdated, right? Obviously, we don't follow these policies because it would require an annual budget. We don't do an annual budget, we do a biannual budget. So that's just some kind of cleanup that I'm sure you'll catch. But it's, so that's, you actually now know everything. All the rest looked fine to me. So I guess we'll see what proposals you've, for what it's worth, I did want to make one overall comment, which is I've been worried about this topic for a few years, because I think you probably know your predecessor tried to bring this to council and get us to kind of relook at this and time, whatever, we never got to that. But I have a general concern that there are policies around the city that ought to be administrative policies set by the city administrator, approved by the mayor, and really don't need the council to be involved. And I would really like to see us take this chance. I mean, these policies, many of these were written long before we were a city the size we are. And I just think I'd really like to see us try to really focus in on that which is council policy and needs to be, and really ask ourselves, shouldn't the rest of this be administrative policy and really not in the domain of the council? So I encourage you to use that lens. As an example, if someone says, travel policy, well, I suppose it depends what's in there, but my first thought is, why is that a council thing? Wouldn't that just be an administrative policy? So things like that, but just encourage you to have that point of view. And Councilmember Christensen, I don't know if you have a differing point of view on that, but that was my point of view.
Yeah, that seems appropriate. I mean, I want to know, I guess, the pros and cons of having council completely cut out of the loop, and the degree, I guess, of that before making a completely blanket statement. But yeah, I agree. A number of those types of issues should be handled without requiring our involvement in it.
Yeah, I really concur with that comment as well. And there may be certain policies where you sort of say, well, this portion of it maybe is a council policy, but then the rest of this really is, let's leave that to administration. It's not really a council policy level, maybe setting the overall thing, don't travel on city dollars to Russia, maybe. But beyond that, things like which airline you're going to use and things probably are not something the council needs to be involved with, right? Okay. So I didn't have any other comments, Councilor Christians. I think City Administrator would like, or sorry, Finance Director would like us to look at Exhibit B, this risk assessment worksheet. Are you ready to have a look at that?
Absolutely.
Okay. So did you have any comments you wanted to make on this?
Well, I'm not entirely sure how helpful my comments would be. I think that when we looked at it before, in the last meeting, I don't think that I understood that the template was kind of a set package that had already been issued by, and I'm not recalling the name of the entity that issued it.
Yeah.
But I had kind of thought that it was more personalized to us, and so I thought that that's where kind of like the conversation was going to go. But since it's kind of a prepackaged deal, I'm not sure that I have any comments on it that'd be particularly helpful, since it's already set up to address all of these other bigger issues.
Yeah. So let me share my point of view on this. I think that the concept here is of having this done, at least by someone, is a good idea. I think I think that asking the city council to complete this is a bad idea. And the reason is because it doesn't really ask policy questions, it asks risk assessment questions. And I don't think that, I certainly as a council member don't feel qualified to make a risk assessment. What I would really like to see is our professional staff, who I think are qualified, I'd love to see their assessment and then be able to ask them questions. I have no objection to sort of approving or adopting or something of that nature, but rather than council trying to fill this out, I'd really like to see a recommended answer to this, if you will, or a recommended assessment that the city could then, or the council could then sort of adopt or approve or something of that nature. I just don't feel that we're qualified. So I think it's a mistake to go down this path, and I'd hate to see us come up with an assessment that our own professionals might not agree with. Councilmember Christensen.
So what I thought might be helpful is if city council goes through and we fill it out individually, but we have a lot of the weight perhaps put on the experts' opinions, but just so that we can understand it from there. Does that make sense?
It does. I thought about that as well. And if we want to do that, of course, fine. But I really think it's a mistake. I think, I just think none of us are qualified to answer these questions. So we're going to sort of make uneducated guesses when we have professionals who actually know how to make these assessments. And I think it's a good chance we make poor assessments. And then, I don't even, is there legal exposure? But forget that. I just think I'd hate to have council members feeling foolish when they sort of didn't know a bunch of things, sort of filled this out, and then our professionals say, well, all this sort of, I can't think of anything else. The council doesn't do risk assessments to tell the police department where the cars should patrol in the evening. We don't tell, we just don't do this kind of thing anywhere else. And I think it's a mistake to do it here. I think it's a good idea to hear from the professionals and then approve their advice or question their advice, go through that process. But I don't know, what's your reaction to that?
I mean, it's a close call. I definitely think that professionals would be better attuned to this. It may help facilitate a conversation to the extent that we have one if council members do fill it out, even if they don't share what their numbers or their scores end up being. But
So
I do agree that certainly any emphasis should be placed on the professional evaluation, however that's done.
So Finance Director, what do you think about an approach where then perhaps what we do is we we asked the council members to fill it out in preparation for then reviewing this, but we also asked, professionals at the city to give us the city's, professional assessment of this, if you will. And then when we sort of bring everyone together to sort of having had council members go through in advance before seeing the professionals and kind of do their own thinking, then they come prepared for a better conversation. How does that seem as an approach?
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. One step ahead of you, department directors will be completing the risk assessment as well, because they do have insight and can help in that conversation when council's deliberating on what those reserve targets might be. So yes, you're going down the right kind of protocol in this tool. I've used it with other councils where council wanted to each complete them individually, and then they were submitted to me, and just a summary of the scoring was provided. So it wasn't individual council members with Council Member Mayhew had this score and Council Member Christensen had this score. So that's another way to do it as well. But the department heads and mayor, administration staff will be completing risk assessments, and yes, used by the council to understand what the professionals feel. And then, of course, you all have the risk assessment so that you will be, you'll understand the inner workings of how the tool works. And so hopefully that helps for, that dialogue on the risk and reserve section. So we're right with you on strategy for using this tool.
So let's do this then. By the way, I assume you're closely coordinating with city attorney regarding any liability that having these forms sort of completed, and just you're closely, I don't want to say anymore. I'll just say you're closely coordinating with city attorney on this, I hope.
Well, there is no, yes, the city attorney will also be completing the risk assessment. But this is not a decision making. This is a tool for those who are decision makers to see where they fall in their assumption of risk. And so certainly the city attorney can weigh in on whether or not there is any legal ramifications for council members completing this assessment.
Or staff.
Or staff.
Yeah, let me try and, I'm being cryptic because I'm trying to be cautious and protective of the city. I will just tell you that risk assessments like this in my professional career are closely kept as a legally protected document under attorney-client privilege. The attorneys are very cautious about risk assessment documents because should something happen, they can be, I'm just going to stop talking about it. I would just say, please.
Mr. Chair?
Who's there? Mr. Sturbank.
Yes, and I have been following the conversation, and yes, I will coordinate with Director Ferguson.
But I will say no more then.
Yeah, thank you very much. Okay.
So then following that, so perhaps what we could do is when we're ready to have the full council kind of discussing this, is in the lead up to that, Councilor Christensen, if you agree with this, in the whatever it is, 2 weeks before that or whatever he thinks the appropriate time frame, finance director, send it out to council members, ask them to complete it on their own, because the city's advice will be coming, but the recommendation is for them to go through on their own and have completed it so they come better prepared for the discussion. Does that seem like so first off, Councilor Christensen, does that sort of fit your thinking as well?
It does, but I am happy to revise that based on any conversations between then and now.
Super. So Finance Director, does that sound, we leave that with you?
That sounds just fine. Thank you.
Okay, and just to be clear, I didn't have any comments regarding the document itself or any adjustments I thought needed to be made to it. Did you, Councilmember Christensen?
I do not.
Okay, we leave it with you, Finance Director, okay?
Thank you.
All right, and then as far as, well, actually, I told you all the notes I had on the whole thing, so we'll wait to see the proposed, and then we'll talk to you further. Oh, and I owe you, and I will try to prompt the other two council members who have been here for a while to send you any, shall we say, more informal policies that we think are in existence, so you can corral them all up. Okay, let me just
Thank
actually
you.
write, let me write my to-do there. Okay, got it. All right, moving on to Agenda Bill 22080, Finance Department restructure. So thank you for the memo. I thought I understood it completely. Councilmember Christensen, did you have any questions, or would you like to hear further presentation on it from Finance Director, or any comments?
I just had a question. So it looks like this will also be adding on another staff member, but I didn't see any budget impacts for adding the additional person. Is that accurate? And that would be for the budget analyst position?
Go ahead, Finance Director.
The budget impacts in the agenda bill, there would be no impacts to the budget requiring a budget amendment. In previous approvals from the council authorized the mayor to execute an agreement with Robert Half for temporary or limited term staffing, and we have done that, and we have a temporary budget analyst that we were able to find a great candidate for. So this is adding the position, a budget analyst position, to the finance structure. Budget impact, again, is no proposed budget amendment, as we had underspent 2021 allocations in the general governmental funds, the general fund, and nonetheless, we also then would be spreading out the cost of this particular position through the indirect cost allocation plan to those benefiting funds. So no budget amendment required for this request.
Okay.
All right, so I have just a couple different thoughts on this. The first is I think we ought to have really good housekeeping, and I don't like having council being asked to weigh in on things that I think are not the council's purview. I think it's bad precedent, it's bad training for council members. It's sort of, it's a mistake to do. So some of this, such as who reports to whom, I think ought to be, and maybe I need to be corrected, but I think that ought to be out of our purview. I think that's up to city administrator and mayor to approve. And unless I'm missing something, I think we ought to sort of stay out of it. Now, I'm not sure you were asking us to approve it. It may have been just to help us understand what was going on, but just a general comment, I think we should stay out of, council should stay out of that which is not its domain. And I guess I'd say any of this that you can move forward on without council approval, I think you should do that. and not ask for approval. Having said that, I think that adding positions does require council approval. I believe we have to approve how many positions and what they are, and I think where they fall in the pay scale. And I think that's all something we would have to approve. And so I'm sort of torn here because I have long thought that our finance department is understaffed. So I actually completely support what's trying to be done here. I also think very highly of the individual being considered for promotion and completely support that happening. But having said that, I think that approving additional positions, which to do that outside of the appropriation process, I think is an enormous mistake. I think it's frankly exactly what the appropriation process is designed to stop us from doing. The reason is because when you add a position, it's not an impact to the current year only, or even the current biennium only. And frankly, I think the city's in a budget crisis, an absolute crisis when you look out at 6 years, because every city is in Washington state. We have 8% inflation with a 1% cap on our property tax. We have union contracts that are all up being negotiated. We have, I think it's to look at adding positions without the budget process of doing that 6-year lookout and really thinking about the full impact, I think is an enormous mistake. So I think it's bad housekeeping. So even though I completely support everything that's being proposed, I don't think it should be done outside of the budget process. And so temporary positions, fine, or term limited positions that go through the end of the year, I'd completely support any of that. But anything with longer term implications, adding additional authorized positions, I'm against doing that outside of the budget process. So don't know if you want to make any comments, or Councilmember Christensen, if you have any comments or questions regarding that. But so my thought is I'm absolutely, unfortunately, against this, doing this outside of the budget process, but would entirely support it in the budget process.
So just so that I understand then, so what is the implication then of that, since it does seem like it's a time sensitive matter? And I'm trying to figure it out because it's for both this, I'm assuming, and it would apply to something further down the agenda as well.
Yeah, so my own view is that from a committee perspective, I don't think there's any additional information that is needed in order for the council to consider this. So I don't think that, if administration would like to see this go to the full council, I think that's entirely appropriate, and I would vote yes, that should happen. But I just wanted to say I would vote against. I plan to vote against it for the reasons I just stated when it gets to council, and I would vote against giving it a committee recommendation. Fine with us being silent as to recommendation, but so I'm fine with it going forward. I just am against it for the reasons I stated. So I guess then maybe we just sort of make a decision. Do we want to go ahead and send it up to the full council? What is kind of where you at, Councilmember Christensen? But also if administration wants to consider that further at all, you can tell us, but or whether we'd rather just see it move forward, that's fine. From my perspective, that's fine as well.
I think I'm comfortable with it moving forward. I do want to give finance a chance to respond.
And it's fine if you respond now, but don't feel like you have to. I'll make the same comments at council. And so if you want to have time to sort of think through what your thoughts or comments would be in that regard, feel free to take that time. I just wanted to sort of let you know my thinking, but as I said, I'm not opposed to it moving forward. Go ahead, Finance Director.
Thank you. I don't have any further comments right now. I'll take your comments and feedback into consideration and speak with the mayor and city administrator on next steps. And then if you do choose to move this forward to the council, then if there is any additional feedback that you'd like to provide to add to the agenda bill or provide input to the agenda bill going forward.
All right, well then why don't we, Councilor Christensen, if there's no objection, then we'll vote to, or we'll approve it to move forward to full council on the regular agenda without recommendation.
I'm agreeable to that.
Okay, and then Finance Director, if you or administration decides between now and then that you want to pull back and think about it further, you can always remove it from the agenda, but we'll put it on the agenda. And yeah, I just want to leave you with the thought that I actually completely support adding staff. I just feel like it needs to be thought through and considered in the context of the full budgeting process.
Thank you.
And I think you got a great candidate there for promotion. Okay, let's see. Moving on then to fire department staff request. So we don't have an agenda bill there, but so I think, Chief, are you planning to talk to us a bit about that? So I think both of us are pretty good at doing our homework. So we've read what you sent us, but happy to have discussion.
Yeah, no, the reason why I added it as a discussion, as you can see by the memo, I started this conversation with the mayor and city administrator back in April. It's gone through the public safety committee, and we felt that because it was a budget related issue, it needed to come through the finance and administration committee for discussion. I did actually, I had no idea that the finance committee, or I'm sorry, the finance department was forwarding something very similar to you this evening. And when I saw that on Friday afternoon, I actually crafted an agenda bill in case you wanted to have one attached to it to move forward to full council for discussion. And I don't dispute anything you're saying, Mayor Pro Tem. In fact, when I presented this to the mayor and the city administrator, I said, I hate to come at this time. It's the worst possible time. We're going into the budget process. It almost feels like I'm trying to jump out ahead of them, but I have this issue that I'm trying to solve within the fire department. And frankly, this would have been our only request coming out of the fire department on this next budget season. And that's why I put it on as a discussion item to have that dialogue that you had just had with on the finance related topic. You read the agenda bill. You see we have an impending deadline that's coming up. We have very few good options that'll help solve that. And then in addition to, we also are struggling with some of our other programs within the fire department, and this addition would actually help solve both of those issues that we need to come to the conclusion on. And you also may have noted in the memo that not only did we come with, hey, we have this need, we also have a funding solution to help solve that issue with the ongoing expense for the training consortium and reducing the administrative assistant position to half-time and some additional revenue the fire department's planning on bringing in. So again, I like to try to come to the table with solutions, not only with challenges. I did hear what you had to say. Again, I don't disagree with it regarding coming in outside the budget season, but we do have this impending need. That's a WAC requirement that we're hoping to solve with adding this additional person within the fire department before June, so that we'll be ready to go in July.
So my own thought, for what it's worth, is so first off, I would have a similar point of view. I think you need to bring that agenda bill to one of the. It doesn't. I think it could go here, or it could go to public safety, whichever committee you think. It doesn't need to go to two committees. Just pick one. I'm convinced that either committee would send it through to the full council with the same thinking. But I would say that I would have the same thought that you just heard me express before about. Just that's what the budget process is for, and we need to think out 6 years. I would add, I do have a big concern that we're in the process of union negotiations, adding a position when we're facing this massive headwind on inflation. And it just seems like a mistake to me without seeing the full budget picture and sort of, is this something we can sustain? I would, for what it's worth personally, I would support and argue that we ought to support some kind of interim solution. I know that the interim, you listed out kind of the other solutions that are available and why those weren't very good solutions in your view. And I don't dispute your point of view on that. I just, for the reasons I've said, I still think it's a mistake. I would support doing something, any one of those other options for, and for 6 months or, till we get done with the process. But that's just one council member's point of view. But just so you know, that's what I would argue in front of the full council as well. So, I mean, you're not bringing this to us because you don't need it. And I get that. It's just, there are a lot of needs. And I think that's what the budget process is for. So I have nothing more to add to that. Councilmember Christensen, go ahead.
Well, I certainly understand that is what the budget process is for. I do think that there needs to be at least a little bit of flexibility in a situation like this where we do have an immediate need that needs to be addressed before we're getting through. Would making a position like this on a probationary or temporary basis be something that you'd feel more comfortable with? Like if we said for the next 18 months and then come back and reevaluate? Because the other thing is that would give us more time then to decide if we did want to join the new Kirkland East Side Consortium or look into other options once the dust is settled on them getting their process together.
I love that idea, although slightly different than the way you said it. I would be in favor of approving a term limited, so no more than 18 months, meaning the position actually ends. The thing that gives us a chance to do is hire someone. Now, the problem is that's hard to fill that if someone thinks the job's going to end at 18 months, but it does give us a chance if we thought we could be successful at hiring someone, then to go through the budget cycle. And if in fact we approve it permanently in the budget cycle, then we would just, go that path. But so I'd be supportive of some time limited solution.
Okay.
But I think because the question, I'm sorry, there was one other, yeah. So anyway, any sort of time limited solution, I would certainly support and would argue in favor of. This doesn't seem like some frivolous request. It's well thought out and well explained. So I'm just wondering, if you think about the analysis that was done, which I just want to make one more comment on, but if you think about the analysis was done, it's focused, this is a forever position. If we authorize a position, we got to pay for it 4 years from now and 6 years from now. And that's what I'm worried about. I'm not worried about the next 2 years. This year we're flush.
Yeah.
But 2 years from now, we're not going to be flush. And so that's what I'm worried about.
Yeah, and I certainly understand that. I do like that the memo includes options for new sources of funding going forward that we haven't necessarily pursued in the past. And I do want to make sure that we have coverage for the training for the folks that we have right now as both the career firefighters and for the volunteers, because they do a huge benefit.
Yeah, no, I agree with that comment. The one thing I'd say though, we had a similar thing, Chief. Remember, I want to say a couple of years ago, we were doing something with regard to, I think the EMS or anyway, I remember we ended up having a billing, we realized we could do some billing, I think, to insurance, and that was sort of brought forward in conjunction with some spending. And I do just want to say, I think it's great that we're thinking about new revenue sources, and I think we should absolutely always do that. But I don't think that our public safety department or even most of the other departments should feel that they need to, I think if we need a firefighter, we need a firefighter. And I think that the citizens would support that. And I think the council would support that regardless of whether, frankly, it's great. I think it is your job to think about new revenue sources, but that's really the council's job. We need to fund those things and we need to find out how to do that. And if you tell us you need a firefighter, I think we want to just be told that, and we'll find a way to fund it. Great if you give us some ideas, but hopefully you bring us those ideas regardless. But I don't think you have to ask us for what you need. I think we want to hear what you need, and we want to try and meet that need. So as a general idea for, anyway, one council member's point of view. Mayor, go ahead.
So, you know, our fire department's made up of both volunteer and career, and we've been adding more volunteers. And so I'm not sure if we're looking to get up to 18. Is that correct, Chief Frere?
Yes.
So we're adding at least 8 more, and the person that would train them is the person that we're trying to hire. And these are volunteers are free. I think they get maybe less small. They get less of a stipend than council does on a monthly basis. And so if we can't have a trainer, and I get that you want to wait till the next budget, that he's provided different revenue options. If we can't have a trainer, I'm not sure that we can have a robust volunteer program. So then we are going to have to hire more career firefighters to backfill the volunteers, because most likely they would already be trained. So we really need to consider that if we want to have a robust volunteer program.
Absolutely. And
Yeah, Mayor, your comments are, in my opinion, very well taken. You're exactly right. You know, we need to support our public safety. We need to support our volunteers. Couldn't agree more. I think the thing I worry about with the budget cycle is exactly this kind of analysis, which is there is just an awful lot of things that our residents would benefit tremendously from. We can't do them all. We just can't. There's just a list that's too long. So the budget process is designed to sort of go through with that 6-year lookout. You know, what can we do and what can we sustain, and force us through the process of figuring out how we're going to afford that. So sometimes we say, you know what, we got to go back to the voters and ask for a tax increase because we really need this thing. We did that a few years ago. So, you know, levy lid lift. So I just think we've got to go through that process of measuring these things against each other, prioritizing. It doesn't mean that one thing's not important. This most certainly is. It's just, so are other things, which that's what a budget process is for. So that's all I'm arguing for. Certainly recognize the need here. All right, so I think then hopefully that's useful, I guess, to you, Chief and Mayor. I think the message is, you know, if you want to bring it forward, you know, either committee is going to send it through to the full council, and at least, you know, what one guy's a point of view will be on it. And to be clear, it's not against the position. It's just about, let's do it in the budget process. And if we need to do something to get you from here to here that's interim, I also support that. Whatever your best interim, you know, solution would be.
Yeah.
Yeah, there isn't one, I know.
No, I'm a little bit lost on, that's the challenge with doing a biennial budget, right? Because we can't predict when these things are going to happen and how, and again, I totally understand that now is the worst time. To your point a few minutes ago about bringing these things to council, the additional positions that have been added in the fire department were added through ambulance billing transport back in 2014, a public safety levy again in 2016. And then I believe there was one additional public safety levy a few years after that or before that added it. So even though the fire department has consistently been bringing in additional revenue, and I jokingly say that we're subsidizing the general fund because it really gets the finance staff all worked up, like how are we subsidizing the general fund? But the reason why I brought forth the request now is because of trust me, I totally understand where you're coming from. And I wouldn't have pushed this forward if I didn't think it was an immediate need that we need to solve, because we're going to potentially end up becoming non-compliant with our training. And as a fire chief, my first concern is not only the safety of the community, but it's the safety of my firefighters. And trust me, I will come to the table with additional solutions that you can look at and consider short-term potentially. But I do need to find a way to solve this for the best interest of the community and the fire department. So I can't stress that enough. I hope you understand that. And trust me when I tell you, I wouldn't have brought this forward if I didn't think it was a priority right now, this minute, that we need to solve by July 1st.
Hey, Chief, the one thing I wasn't clear on, I take it we sort of had a plan when we decided to the plan was to go with this other consortium, but that sort of hasn't come together timely. That's kind of what sort of upset our plan. Is that right?
So we joined the South King County, great question. We joined, and I didn't provide a level of detail because I didn't think it was going to get to that level, but we joined the South King County Fire Training Consortium and anticipating staying with that group for as long as we could. About 6 months ago, Eastside Fire and Rescue, who's our primary mutual aid partner, decided to withdraw from that program and then go and start this new one. The problem is when we joined the South King County Fire Training Consortium initially, they said we were going to have this list of items that we were going to get from them, but we only got about half of them. So I'm reluctant to hook basically our horse to another wagon that's almost identical to the one that's down there. That's why my preference would be to hire an additional staff person to do that all in-house, still coordinate our training all around with these other agencies. And then after the dust settles and after those things come together, and if it makes sense for the city to look at joining them down the road, then we could do that. There wouldn't be a cost to the city per se to do that, because the way the consortium works is if you assign a staff person to it, then that equals the amount of money that you would end up having to write a check for, like we're doing right now. That's why that 45,000 or 50, it's actually 54,000. When we joined this, it was only 45,000. It went up to 54,000 this year, and they were predicting it was going to go up to 70,000 potentially next year. So we were really forced with a decision to have to look at other options anyway, on top of it.
I'm sort of thinking about Councilmember Christensen's comment a little bit earlier on the other matter, but I wonder, I'm just trying to develop my thinking a little more. So we used to pay an amount, or we're currently paying an amount that will stop at June 30th to the training consortium we're in?
Correct.
That's that roughly 45,000 that you were just mentioning?
That's what it is per year. Yes, about $55,000.
So effective July 1st, there's 45,000 that we've been spending all along.
Half of it.
That what?
Half of it, because we've already spent half of it for the first half of the year.
Yeah, okay. But on an annualized basis,
yeah,
45,000 annualized basis.
Correct.
That we now are no longer spending.
Correct.
So if I'm trying to think about long-term, well, that's long-term 45,000 every year we've been spending that suddenly we're not going to be spending.
Yeah, about 95,000 of it that we had proposed in the memo has been approved in the budget and long-term expenditures, because we're looking at reducing the administrative staff person to half-time, which that's an ongoing expense as well.
So that would be a permanent change on the, because you're authorized for a full staff person, right? Sorry, a full administrative person.
Correct.
So you're saying make a permanent change to that. So
Sure.
we pick up 40. No, I'm just trying.
No,
to
I understand what you're saying. Yeah, for me, I look at uniform staff and non-uniform staff. So, but to your point, yes, the fire department's full FTE count would change by 0.5.
So it's just 0.5, and that 0.5, if we just think about it, I know there's a little bit of difference in pay salaries, but just that 0.5, you're saying actually long-term we've been paying a training fee, and well,
so it could be less. It could be like a 0.2 adjustment to your point is what I think.
Well, which at that point, honestly, Chief, if that's how I had understood it, if your agenda bill said that, I would be in favor of it, because I no longer see a long-term question here. We're just trading this for that.
My agenda bill will say that, Mayor Pro Tem. It's right here. You haven't seen it yet.
If that's what you say, Councilor Christensen, if you see it differently than what I'm saying, please. I sort of feel like, wait a minute, now I think there isn't a long-term. It's got the long-term trade-offs in there.
Yeah, it's more of a reallocation.
Yes. So actually, Chief, I would, if that's what your agenda bill says, I actually would be in favor of that today.
Okay, I'm going to stop talking now. Thank you.
So yeah, either committee and either way, I'm sure either committee will send it through to the full council, and then just you'll have my vote if that's how it's teed up.
Okay, well, we'll bring it back to either this this committee meeting or the public safety committee. They can discuss it there and then we'll move it to full council if that sounds okay to you.
Sounds
Awesome.
good.
Thank you very much for helping connect the dots. Again, that's why I brought it here as a discussion. And I'm glad I did so that we could work through those details together. So thank you.
Great. Thanks, Chief. All right. Oh yeah, time. So let's move on to work plan. Any comments regarding the work plan or any questions? All right, seeing none, we'll move on to review of city council agenda. There we go. Let's see. So City Clerk, the Agenda Bill 22-082 may be on the consent agenda as we discussed earlier. Is that right?
That's my understanding, yes.
Great. And then the Agenda Bill 22-080, if that could come through without a recommendation.
Correct.
Okay. Because actually, I've been trying to figure this out because they're like in our draft here, we have recommended. So we would just pull it out. It would just be, there wouldn't be any recommended action under that one, right?
Recommended action, I mean, the way I interpret recommended action is what city staff is.
Fine. Could we do this? Could we just have it say staff recommended actions or administration recommended actions? So we're just clear on whose recommendation that is.
I can do whatever the committee would like, sir.
All right, let's do that. And then you can just put committee recommendation and just put none. Any other item? Looks like there might be an executive session. Any other item to add or modify to the agenda? Okay, is there something we need to discuss under executive session? And I take it we need to discuss that in an executive session. Okay, do we need it? So would it suffice for us just to approve putting an executive session on the agenda? Or is there any need for this committee to discuss that in advance?
No, I don't think so, Mr. Chair.
Oh, great. Okay, so then, Mr. Sherbank, you'll give the appropriate executive session description to City Clerk.
I have already done so, but I will
Okay.
confirm with her. Thank you.
Super. All right. All right. Any Councilmember Christensen, any questions or comments?
Not at this point.
All right. If there's no objection, then the agenda is approved as discussed. And I always get confused which agenda is the agenda for us. There we go. I think we're going to get in under the gun here. Any other items for discussion tonight? No? All right. Thanks everyone for your time this evening. Have a good evening. If there's no objection, we're adjourned. There's no objection, we're adjourned.
All right, good night.